Good morning, gorgeous. Yes, you. Welcome to the first episode of Rosie Rooted and Rising, a podcast for women over 50 who are grounded in who they are and brave enough to rise into what's next. I'm your host, Rosie Brown, and here we talk real life, reinvention, leadership, and the courage it takes to begin again at any age. Before we get started, I want you to know something. This podcast is launching unedited and audio only, and that's intentional. You see, life is lifing for me right now, and I just didn't want to wait any longer to begin this podcast. You may hear pauses. I might even stumble over my words, and I'll definitely sound animated at times. Sometimes it may sound like I'm reading from a script, because occasionally I am. And guess what? That's okay. Because right now, I believe the message matters more than perfection. This podcast will grow into visual episodes in time, but for now, I'm here. And I'm really glad you are too. So let's get into it. Welcome to Rosie Rooted and Rising, the podcast for women over 50, where we get real about what it means to start over, rise again, and lead with heart. Today, I want to take you back to the moment this podcast was born. Not when it launched, but when the idea first took root back in 2021. And here's the truth. This podcast didn't come with a business plan. It came from a season where my life was shifting in ways I didn't expect. Because for me, this pivot wasn't just professional. It was deeply, deeply personal. I was standing in that foggy middle space between what was and what was no longer working, but not yet knowing what was next. I'm going to say that again. I was standing in that foggy middle space between what was and what was no longer working, but not yet knowing what was next. And if you've ever been there, that place where nothing is clear yet, but everything feels like it's changing, this episode is for you. So if that's you, sis, pull up a chair. Let's talk. Let's talk about what happens when life starts to unravel and you begin to realize maybe it's not falling apart, maybe it's falling into place. That foggy middle is uncomfortable because there are no labels for it. You're not who you used to be anymore, but you don't fully recognize who you're becoming yet. And nobody prepares you for this place or space. People expect you to bounce back, to figure it out quickly, to move on. But what if you're not meant to rush through it? What if that fog is actually a cocoon? Because some of the most important seasons of your life won't come with applause. They'll come with silence. And silence can feel terrifying when productivity had been tied to your worth. I remember asking myself, if I'm not busy, am I failing? If I'm not needed, am I still valuable? Am I still relevant? Those questions cracked something open in me. I didn't plan to be here. I was laid off twice. And the second time in 2021, girl, that one hit different. It wasn't just a job loss. It was an identity loss. I spent years in federal and state government with structure, systems, meetings, and rules. A career that made sense. A career that made sense on paper. It was stable. It was predictable. And I was respected. So when that final call came, the one that starts with, Rosie, can you step into my office for a moment? I felt something inside me crumble. That layoff wasn't just about losing a check. I'm going to say that again. That layoff wasn't just about losing a paycheck. It was about a full body shakeup. It challenged everything I thought I knew about success, security, and who I was supposed to be. That night, I paced my home office. The air felt too still. No emails, no calls, just me, and 1,000 questions echoing in my head. Who am I without the title? What do I do now? And what if I never get a kind of job again? And what if I never get that kind of job again? This was getting real. There was grief as well, not just financial, but emotional. Grief for the routine, the identity, the version of myself that felt secure. And yes, there was also shame. Shame in explaining it. Shame in answering. So what are you doing now? Shame in feeling like I had to justify my existence. I smiled on the outside, but on the inside, I was asking God, did I miss something? Did I make a wrong turn? Here's what I learned about being stripped down to nothing. It forces you to listen to yourself. That quiet space, the one I resisted, became the place where clarity began to grow. That quiet space, the one that I resisted, became the place where clarity began to grow. Sometimes a door closing isn't rejection, it's redirection. And that's when I stopped asking, why did this happen to me? And started asking, who do I get to become next? And instead of fear, I felt something unexpected. Excitement, yes. I've always welcomed new challenges. While change unsettles some people, I learned that I actually thrive in it. For the first time in my life, and in a long time, I felt possibility instead of panic. Here's what I learned, and I learned it the hard way. Your title can be taken, however, your truth cannot. Once the noise faded, I started hearing parts of myself that had been buried under busy. I realized I had a gift for supporting others, organizing chaos, and bringing clarity when things felt overwhelming. Those weren't just skills, they were seeds. I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have mentors yet, but I had clarity and I had faith. Faith didn't look like certainty. It looked like obedience without a map. So I built my own lane. I took everything I learned from state and federal government, the systems, the structures, the paperwork, and I flipped it. I decided to create something that served people directly. That's how Rosie's Real Estate Solutions was born. And I'll share more about that journey in later episodes. I started small, one client, one referral, one closing at a time. I was scrappy, strategic, and a little scared. Actually, I was a lot scared. But each step reminded me that I could build something of my own. And that's where this podcast comes in. Because Rosie, Rooted and Rising, grew from that same soil. The realization that reinvention isn't about starting over. It's about starting deeper, especially for women over 50, especially for those of us who've spent years being what the world needed and are finally ready to be who we are. I stopped chasing approval and I started chasing alignment, and that changed everything. This show exists because I know how lonely a pivot can feel. Again, this show exists because I know how lonely a pivot can feel. You're reinventing yourself, and most of the time, nobody's clapping in the beginning. People say, "You're so brave." But what they don't see are the tears behind that bravery, the late night Googling, the quiet prayers, the mornings you stand in the mirror and say, okay, just get through the day. This show isn't about perfection. This space is about honesty, real conversations, no filters, no highlight reels. We'll talk about burnout, boundaries, courage, clarity, sisterhood, and of course, my favorite, systems, because it takes all of that to build something sustainable. There's accountability here as well. Again, there's accountability here as well. No pressure, not shame. Just the kind that helps you pause, reflect, and take one brave step forward. More than anything, I want this space to feel like home to you. A place where you don't have to have it all figured out, because who does? Where you don't have to explain yourself, because why? Because your story matters, even when you're still in the messy middle. And here's the truth I come back to again and again. Your next chapter doesn't need permission. It needs a decision. I'm going to say that again. Your next chapter doesn't need permission. It needs a decision. You don't need validation. You don't need anyone or everyone to understand. They can't, because they've never lived your life. You just need to decide what the next version of you is. Hold on. You just need to decide that this next version of you is worth showing up for. I'm going to say that again. You just need to decide that this next version of you is worth showing up for. If you've been waiting for a sign, sis, this is it. Start. Even if your voice shakes, even if the map isn't drawn, even if no one else believes in you yet, even if no one listens to your podcast, you are allowed to pivot. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to begin again. You can rebuild with wisdom, not fear. You can rest without quitting. You can rise without rushing. That's what being rooted is about. So here's your first move. Hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Leave a review and be honest. And tell me what part of this story resonated with you. Come hang out with me on Instagram at Rosie Rooted and Rising and share your pivot moment using the hashtag Rosie Rooted and Rising Podcast. Because this isn't just a podcast, it's a movement. A reminder that no matter what life takes from you, it can never take who you are. It can never take who you are. Until next time, sis, stay rooted, stay blessed, and keep rising. New episodes every Monday morning.